Hello, welcome to Conversations for the Moving Self. I am your host, Megan, a lifelong movement artist and facilitator. Each week, I invite you inside of the honest conversations that I have been having with some incredibly inspiring movement and well-being practitioners, as we unpack the beautiful roller coaster it is to pursue a lifestyle built around movement and well-being. Join us as we share and reflect on the moments where movement lights your soul on fire, to the situations where you begin to question everything. Welcome to episode 6 of Conversations for the Moving Self. This is Tina Afiyan Brieova, who is a movement director, performer, and educator. She's Armenian and Czech and is currently working in China, but we met in London. I had the incredible opportunity to train with Tina at London Contemporary Dance School, and also just anytime I can, I try and get back in Tina's class. I think from day one being in the space with Tina, the sense of curiosity, but also sense of attention to detail and how to hold a space in a really nurturing way, was just a super fruitful space for me to be in. Yeah, I'm super inspired by the way that she brings this sense of quiet power. And I am always so inspired by the calmness and kindness and just true dedication to her practice. And we haven't seen each other in a while, so it's a nice opportunity for us to check in, and I'm excited to hear about how Tina's doing along the projects she's working on at the minute. So to start, I just would like to ask you, Tina, how you're showing up for your movement and well-being practice today.
Thank you for the nice intro. And I felt a bit nostalgic thinking about also other spaces we met outside of Atlanta Contemporary Dance School, these little pop-up workshops or classes, and always seeing you there has just always been so nice. Um, how am I showing up to my practice right now? Something that I feel is happening recently more than before is that one thing that I think previously in the past I was practicing was if I wanted to show up somehow for myself, I felt like there's a pressure to create a lot of space for it. I felt like I need to book a studio or go somewhere or do a class or be led. And I felt like there needs to be a big commitment to it. And I think recently, I think I show up in a very small, sustainable, repeatable ways. So I created little tiny kind of practices that I can access again and again in the morning or at any time in the day. Um, Part of it, I think, is that my work at the moment, I'm working on a really big immersive show, which means that I work sometimes 10, 11 hours of real physical work and including performances. So that's a lot of already work and very physical and kind of creative work. So at the moment, to me, I show up by having 5 minute little practice in the morning and maybe 5, 10 minutes in the evening, and um, also honoring rest and having real rest, not trying to kind of numb myself or have any kind of escapism, but more going into some solitary time, alone time, which often is really mixed with self-care, or maybe it's the opposite and having some really meaningful social time with my circle. So, but like tiny, tiny things, nothing really major. I think the opposite of something that's kind of, big, something really small, but something that I can access anytime I really need to show up for myself.
Yeah, I think it's something what you said about like this repeatable and sustainable practices is key. I think even I've been reflecting a lot on like just the routines that I'm cultivating or the scenarios that I'm putting myself in a new space and how to make it something that's um going to stay for a long time rather than I do it great for a week and then I fall off the and especially I think when you're like in different spaces at different moments of the year that the energy that comes with a new space can bring something and I'm noticing within myself like how to maybe actually slow the breaks down and come to these smaller moments. And even before a call today, I was like, let me take a moment to do a 5 minute meditation because an hour wasn't going to happen today, and that's okay. Um,
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
yeah,
I think for me, um, and I think feeling rewarded by just doing 5 minutes, feeling that it's enough, and still feeling like you can that there is a benefit to it. And I think because the expectation is so small, because just, oh, I'm just going to do these 5, 10 minutes of something, um, then it's easier to commit even on the day off. Even, for example, today is my day off. It's Monday, but it's my day off. Um, and so even on a day off where I'm planning to be quite passive, those 10 minutes are not so difficult to try and do. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. I really like this. It actually made me think about I have always been curious. I feel like your practice is built a lot around functionality and longevity and sustainability as a mover, and I have this like very vivid memory of being in a class through Moonwalking Bear with Hannes. Hannes Landgoff is an incredible artist who I have had the opportunity to meet in London and train with, and he was providing these classes where different artists were coming in and teaching morning practice for himself and his performer that he was working with, as well as freelancers in the industry in London. And you saying something along the lines of, when I'm 80, I want to be able to get on the ground with little humans, little kids, and still be able to play with them. And I just remember in that moment being like, oh my gosh, I relate so much. And I wondered when that came into being something that you were able to incorporate into your teaching practice and how it became relevant and significant. Because I think, yeah, through a dance lens, a lot of times like there's this like uh these other things that can drive it sometimes. And yeah, just curious when that shift came for you.
So my practice, which is called active action, is a movement practice. Um, it didn't have a name in the beginning. I started teaching and I didn't have a name. I really didn't want to market it. I didn't want to find a title for it. I was really scared that it's gonna restrict me in some form. And only after a few years of having quite an extensive teaching practice and traveling and teaching, that name eventually came. So the reason I'm saying that is because I started teaching already when I was doing one of my first productions as a performer. And before active action was active action in a way. Um, and what I remember is that there was this one creation that I did, which was, and I speak about it quite often because it was really influential. It wasn't actually the very first one, but it was one of the early works I've done. And it was a absolutely wild contract that we performers signed, which meant that we would be working 7 days a week for a whole month and then have 4, 5 days off at the end of the month. So we just worked 7 days a week, 7 days a week, 7 days a week. And at the end of the month, we would have 4 or 5 days off. Where most of the time I would fly to the other country to see my friends and family and then fly back. So really, I had only 2 days off a month. And the creation was this very, very physical dance and circus piece. So the physicality was so high, and we were getting in, like, not we, but I was getting injured, and my body was fatigued and exhausted, but also really overstimulated. And we were just, running for our lives, jumping and flying. And I remember being in a cast with these extraordinary boys who were phenomenal. And we would start at 9 a.m. rehearsing. So at around 8 a.m., I would see them already jamming and playing music really loud. And so they just never stopped. And I realized in that moment in order for me to be able to show up um, the way I want to on the same level of quite extreme physicality, I actually needed to create a practice that's going to keep me sane through this creation. And I remember very vividly that moment, that one morning when I realized, oh, I need something else. And I need something that is going to be supplementary to this very physical work. I can't have the same amount of physicality also in my preparation. I need a practice that's going to keep me going and that's going to keep me going day after day after day for this whole month and then 3 months and then a 1 year tour. So I need something long term. And and so that's the moments where suddenly mindfulness came into the conversation, things that are more functional, efficiency became really important um, in the practice. And then in the artistic exploration, suddenly I needed to access inefficiency. I needed to access things which are artistic and creative and be able to sacrifice some efficient maybe patterns in order to be creative and use my imagination. But in those preparation moments, in these moments, as you call showing up for yourself, I needed something highly efficient, sustainable, kind to the body,
Hmm.
and very aware, something that cultivates awareness so I can sustain that extensive period of rehearsal. So those are the moments where things started to brew. And
Yeah,
and then and that led to reading and researching and studying, and I started accessing information from there.
interesting. Yeah. It made me actually think about like the different, I am not a expert in this at all, but like the different hormonal cycles that different gendered bodies have as well. And this, especially when you're talking about in the project where you're on this month's cycle as well, and how male and female bodies may have different ways that their energy peaks and troughs, and how we can find a way that works for our body individually, and that not every way of training is going to work for everyone, and especially i- in different projects and in different moments. Yeah, interesting, interesting, interesting. I guess within that, I also was curious about you're constantly working in different environments and teaching in different environments as well, and leading spaces for people for different lengths of time, from more like institutional settings or time periods where you have maybe a whole year with students, or uh, maybe these intensive periods with a project, to workshops where you have them in a very brief one-off setting maybe, and maybe you see the same people again a year or 2 years later. I wondered, like, as a facilitator, what first you what first you do to try and invite the students into the depths of your work within a short period of time. And then I have a follow-up question, but I'll hold off for a moment.
I would try not to be too serious about it, but I think but it's a subject that I deeply care about, I think. I think for me, teaching, education, lecturing has always been something that I didn't take lightly. I felt like there is a quite a big responsibility. I have had teachers who have been very discouraging. I have had teachers who would create system of beliefs that would prevent me from doing things. Um, and then I had amazing teachers as well, encouraging and warm and caring. And so I've always um, took it seriously, the craft of sharing. It wasn't just like a side gig to me or a means for money. It just felt as something that is um, maybe less poetic than calling, but but more serious than um, just a gig. So, but something that is a craft to nurture. And so, and therefore, I think I felt that something that's really important as a person who takes on this role of leadership is to have integrity. And this word, I think, is not used enough for in leadership. And I think that means that it's not just in those four walls of the studio, but it means in and out. And that's a really big subject. It's a really, really big subject for me at the moment. And now in my 30s, it became actually a filter that's the only actually filter that I put before I choose work, before I choose people I train with, before I choose people to work with. That's the ballpark. Is that what you say in English?
Yeah,
Yeah. That's
bare
the word.
minimum, like the expectation.
Exactly. And so I think people who take your classes, they feel that. They feel if you are preaching what you practice. They feel if you have integrity. And I think there is a sense of trust that when that is the case, that people have, which you can't buy. They see how you are before and after the class. They see how you speak. They see how you care. They see if your gaze is warm or isn't. They see if you're able to tap into quite strict um, capacity where you are demanding, but you're still caring. Um, and I think that is something that you can nurture. I believe all the things we're not I don't believe in talent, so I'm a big propagator of nurturing and creating skills. But it is a skill that I've built, but also through crises, through collaborating with people that maybe didn't have that. I remember I studied in a university called Parts, and it's a very, very prestigious university in Europe. At the time when I studied, it was probably one of the main main three, but it was the one at that time. And I remember having mentors who would say to me really clearly that they don't actually like people. I remember a
Mm.
person saying, "I just don't like people. I don't like people." And I remember looking at them and thinking, "What are you doing in education system?" Um, and so I think, and the school was genuinely amazing, and I feel very grateful to have graduated it. But I also remember that moment and thinking, you need to love people to do this. Um, and so that's one thing. And then I think, yeah, sorry, I think that's enough maybe as an answer for
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah. No, I think you answered it very well. It was very, I feel like it translates a lot in the way that I feel your spaces are held, and I think it's something that I guess for when had first entered a training space with you, I immediately was kind of taken actually back to like moments where I didn't have such a, can you say the word like safe space, even though like sometimes, yeah, I think this space where like there's this non-negotiable of kindness and warmth and support so that you can like take risks and explore. And it made me think of when I didn't have that and actually was so excited that I could share also because you are working in different spaces around the world. I was able to like share with friends who are in different parts of the world and be like, oh my gosh, Tina's teaching this workshop in this place. You need to go take it. And just knowing that the energy would translate everywhere. And yeah, I think it's something that I also am just inspired by constantly to take into my own teaching practice and that sort of thing. I guess following on from that, it made me think about how when you're in a training space, and I wonder when you're in a training space nowadays, like being led by someone else, what practitioners maybe you seek out and what qualities you're looking for when you're looking for a trace space to train in. I imagine it's quite similar, but if anything comes up, I'd be super interested to hear.
one thing I wanted to add as I was listening to you is that I think what we sometimes miss, sometimes I think there is this tendency recently in the field to believe that if there is a space which is soft and calm and available, and caring, that means that the practice is something very somatic and very kind of slow, and you're just going to kind of roll on the floor for an hour or so. But I think it doesn't have to be. I think that can be a very kind and soft and very caring space. But actually, the things you're doing can be quite challenging, and they can be difficult, and they can be genuinely hard and very physical. It's just that we access that not through come on, but more through you know, knowing when to hold a hand and knowing when to give them theory, just giving them tools for them to actually feel that they can have an independent learning themselves. I guess I just wanted to say that because I think sometimes when we speak about how we hold space, it's also important to say that the space doesn't mean that the space is all about just holding hands and walking in a circle.
Yes,
Just wanted
yes,
to kind of
a
mention
thousand
that, I
percent.
think.
I think it's actually what was coming up for me when I said the word like safe space, because I think, yeah, there becomes this huge taboo at the moment of like it has to be one or the other. And I was having a really nice conversation with a friend recently of like, but can it just be both always? And not even necessarily just in the context of the word safe space, but also in a lot of different concepts and the ability to find like duality and yeah. Yeah.
And then you had a question about me choosing teachers and when I put myself in that space. I adore being a student. I feel completely at peace admitting that I've always been a nerdy person, that I've always been a good student. I'm not inherently anarchistic, yet I'm always on a side of justice, and I'm always on a side of asking for clarity. Um, every single workspace, every single place I've ever inhabited, I've always tried to make it better for the people. But as a student, I'm not inherently a person who would just be antagonistic. So, and I just love learning. But it is harder. I think with more experience you have, when integrity is your filter, I think it's actually quite hard to find people to follow and to learn from. What I do
Mm,
know is that if that is the case, and I do find one or two people, I can see how my body immediately is calm and my mind is calm because immediately I feel a sense of trust. It's an absolute game changer when you trust somebody. I've seen it in the spaces where it can be just a simple um, martial arts class, it can be a yoga class, or it can be an acting place where rather than asking people to go into these extreme emotional spaces, you really lead people there. You just kind of really guide them as in a certain staircase way. And then you guide them back after. You are not just leaving them there hanging, but you also have the skill of guiding them back. And I think that's important. It comes with experience. It comes from desire of knowing that you want to look after people. Um, and then yeah, it's skill, it's skills, and I think educators need to just take this craft seriously. And but those who do, it's yeah, I adore being in the spaces with them.
so nice. This thing of trust and rounding out a training session, a class, or experience in the way that is, yeah, just not dropping people at the end of something or at the peak or, yeah, it's a really interesting moment. And I think you're so right. You can feel the difference in like every inch of your body, and you're just like, no, or fully yes. And it made me think about the scenario you're in at the minute, being in a different location for a few months as well, like how I'm curious, maybe it's a bit of both, but like, and it's also related, of course, project to project, but how when you're in a different location, do you maybe return more to like self-practice or virtual practices that are more, you know what to expect, or how you continue to find that resource in a constantly evolving location? I'm not even really sure if that made sense as a question, so please feel free for me to repeat it if helpful.
I think how I understand the question is that when I am in these different locations, for example, now when I'm 6 months in China, how do I access these places to maybe learn? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or and maybe vice versa, if it is something like, is it something you find yourself maybe returning more to self-practice or virtual practices that you kind of know what to expect from or things like that?
So in my travels, um, and there are periods, more extensive periods of traveling. I think now it almost felt like a relocation to China because it's a half a year contract. Um, in ideal scenario, I always hope that I will be able to access these culturally specific practices and um, I had expectations and hopes that I will leave speaking a little bit Chinese and all of that, but I haven't. I won't. Unfortunately, it's too hard. And, but and then in your question, you're asking about some virtual spaces, and it's true that there is a abundance of actually so many online courses and places where you can learn and videos that you can follow. When there was a pandemic and everything became digital, I remember a lot of people were producing the online content, and it was a really big thing, and it was a wonderful thing in many ways. But I knew quite early on that it doesn't fully work for me, just to follow that screen when it's already pre-recorded. That said, I think there are formats which really do work, and I would myself be curious about exploring the formats that are actually effective. But what I did is that I was doing a lot of actually online classes, but I was there every day and it was real person to person, which of course means that you are maybe monetizing it less. But it is something where you show up and it is you're spending your time and you're really there with the person or multiple people. To me, that is different. And actually, I remember making very meaningful connections because they almost see they see your home and you see theirs and you see them through these different cycles because you've made a commitment to show up. And I remember really creating a lot of connections and seeing a huge development in those people. But because I don't have that, I don't use really online spaces so much for my practices or learning at the moment, meaning myself, me learning or me practicing. And so actually it is indeed a lot of self-practice. Uh, and then it's also finding a few people and poking them and saying, would you want to lead something? Can I follow? So I do a lot of
Mm.
that every now and then because I'm in a big production. There is a lot of performance, a lot of different practices, and they all warm up in the morning. I just, in the beginning, especially now, less so because of a different schedule, but in the beginning, I just remember every now and then poking somebody and saying, "Oh, would you mind leading your practice this morning?" And they say, "Oh, I'm just doing Pilates. I'll do Pilates with you." I didn't mind what it is. I just felt it's nice to be led, but by a person who is right next to me in that moment.
Yeah, definitely. And even that, like you said, not minding what it is, but the concept of being led, like, and being with a person, like there's a sense of community, but there's also a sense of like, I notice sometimes when I'm able to just be led, I can tune more into my body than if I'm self-leading a practice. Like there's two different things my brain's maybe trying to achieve, and there's a different energy to it. But also just the simplicity of going like, ah, but there's so many people around me, like I can just say and not not have to make it a big formal thing, but it just can, it's already happening, and how can we maximize the moment? I don't, that's not necessarily the best word, but hmm, yeah, yeah, I really like this. Yeah, I think that's something I'll sit on for a while. Um, yeah, I think as we like n near the end of the conversation, I one last question maybe I would like to ask is, as we were speaking earlier about like the time periods that you're in China for, and how the project is kind of going like this and going upwards in intensity, but you also have this shift personally in terms of location and where you will be. Um, I wonder what that's bringing up movement wise, creativity wise, emotionally. Yeah, anything that's coming up for you in that way of like as you approach the end of this project, how it's feeling and where you anticipate heading. Obviously, you can't control the future, but
Um, well, we spoke shortly just before we started the recording that there's always this time in between. So the last day of a holiday, it's hard to completely relax because you know that the day after you're flying, that just before you finish a project, the maybe weeks before, and for me now it already feels a month before you are to relocate back to maybe your city, to the place where you live originally, is slightly strange and you're in that kind of foggy space. And so I feel that I feel, oh, am I supposed to now plan what's happening in London? Um, but I think what I'm trying to do at the moment is to say, oh, I think I always notice when my mind starts to be perhaps a little bit anxious about the fact that I'm about to have a change. I think as humans, inherently, we don't necessarily like change that much. Um, I think I have enough experience, life experience at this point to know that change is good, but doesn't change the fact that I don't like it that much. Um, and so when I catch myself having these feelings and this feeling of uncertainty and this feeling of maybe even like small little bursts of panic of, oh my God, I need to do this, I need to do this, and this pressure, I usually take a moment to realize, oh, but I still have a month here. And actually, what it then leads me to is to feel really excited about making the most of it. I think when we
Mm.
have a time pressure, we usually start realizing how precious the time that we still have left is. And so I'm anticipating that this month is actually going to be quite a beautiful month when I'm hoping to make the most of it. Um,
Mm.
with food and connections and new friendships and performing and performing two really intricate characters, exploring them more, enjoying performing, enjoying connections in an immersive setting. The audience is so close, so you can really enjoy that. And then I will probably cross that bridge when I get to it. I'll probably start fully. Hopefully, I will manage to fully start transitioning into this new stage when I'm on the plane. Um, and yeah, that's my hope. But also because I'm really bad with admin and all of that, so I think I'm just avoiding as well. So I'm trying to be fancy a little bit, but the truth is, I also just procrastinate on planning and making all of that. That's also the truth. Um, But yeah, I'm trying not to be too much in the future at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, even if it is a little bit of both, like I think both is can offer you quite a bit as well. Like the even the procrastination can offer you an ability maybe to not leave and go, ah, but I didn't have the chance to soak up. And I feel like also a month is quite a nice time. Like it's not 2 days, it's a good amount of time, which is a cool opportunity to be able to take away not just a more holistic or well-rounded vision of the experience. From food to location to friendships. And yeah, also quite nice within the performing space to have 6 months and not be like stuck in the sense of, okay, I have all these performances in 1 week and there's no time to be able to have the human part of life as well.
Hmm.
It's lovely. Well, I think we'll pause there just as I'm aware of your time. Thank you so much for chatting.
Actually, I need to see that it's just because it's 6:30 almost here, so it's as we were talking, it just became
It's quite nice. There was a bit of an overlap in the audio, but essentially, Tina was 3 hours ahead of what I am currently. So, as we were speaking on Zoom, it got much, much darker outside in China compared to where I am. But no, it's been so lovely, and I appreciate like you being so open to sharing and bringing the exact same energy that I feel in a teaching space with you to a virtual conversation as well. So everyone who's listening, you're able to find all the episodes on all major streaming platforms. Episodes will be posted on Saturdays and guest announcements on Tuesdays. If you have any questions or comments or would like to hear anything else from Tina or I, let us know. Thank you so much for listening to episode 6 of Conversations for the Moving Self. And biggest thanks to Tina Afiyan Brieova for joining me today. It was such a lovely episode, and I had such a nice time exploring these themes around sustainability and longevity and dance and movement spaces. Please follow along for all of the upcoming episodes and sending you all warm wishes. Thank you so much from CMS. Lots of love.